Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another edition of Texting with me, Tomek, in St. Petersburg.
And with me, Mark Will in Taipei.
Today's episode, we're taking another request, this time from Aiden, who you may have heard on the episode where I traveled to England. And Aiden is my partner as we go to attempt to watch an Arsenal match, but we end up just kind of hanging out outside. But you heard a little bit of a back and forth between us. Aiden is an aspiring sociologist, fellow teacher, and preparing for a move to Shanghai in the fall. So
Oh,
it should be
really?
an interesting experience, and maybe
Has he
I'll
been to
manage to get
China
out there.
before?
He has. He hasn't been to Shanghai, but I think he's been to Nepal, and yeah, it'll be an interesting place to be for sure. With the way that geopolitics are changing, and Shanghai is supposed to be a very modern, cosmopolitan city. Have you been to Shanghai?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When, and what did you think about it?
I think 2003.
Okay. Did you like it?
Uh, I wasn't there long enough to form a strong opinion about it, but I think I think it was there that I got stuck in the most densely packed crowd I've ever been in. Like, uh, it was just on some street, and that was unsettling.
So like stuck, like you couldn't move, or what?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I felt like uh, if we weren't careful, someone could have gotten trampled. I don't think anyone did, but it was just bodies packed too tightly together. It was a little bit too close for comfort.
Do you know why people were assembled at this particular
It was
junction?
just, I don't know, it was just a busy time of the evening.
Okay. Because yeah, Seoul obviously for both of us has some moments where you feel in the intensity of crowds. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
like on a bus. Sometimes I
Sure.
remember some insane angles I had to take up for long periods of time just to
Yeah.
squeeze on.
Subways too. And
But
that,
either way, I'm very intrigued about China, and
mm-hmm.
I want him to watch the film "Farewell, My Concubine." Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe we could even make that a topic of a future episode.
Well, yeah, we could. There are a lot of good Chinese films.
Nice. Okay,
Speaking of
so
films,
yeah, speaking of films, we're taking a request, as I said, from Aiden, and he has suggested that we talk about the 2000 British drama This Is England. Now, neither Mark nor I had seen this film,
wait,
which
it
I think
came out
is
in 2000, you say?
2006.
2006, okay.
Um, I think it's kind of notable just the fact that neither of us have seen it, because it seems now, as I've watched it and read about it, that it is a pretty huge film, cult film, maybe at the level of like a Train Spotting or a Guy Ritchie film. I mean, it clearly did well and has a dedicated audience. I should also mention that there's a docudrama which followed, um, called "This Is England," starring the same people, and Aiden also strongly recommends that we watch that. So I think there's This Is England 86, This Is England 90, and looking at different issues in the UK at those times and with the similar cast of characters, as I said.
So there's a film which we watched, and there's a TV series.
Right.
And we should also mention that the title seems to be an allusion to the Clash song, This Is England, from the Cut the Crap album.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, a Joe Strummer solo project.
So a super quick wiki description. I'll just read about 3 sentences. This Is England is a 2006 British drama film written and directed by Shane Meadows. The story centers on young skinheads in England in 1983. The film illustrates how their subculture, which has its roots in 1960s West Indies culture, especially ska, soul, and reggae music, became influenced by the far right, especially white nationalists and white supremacists, which led to divisions within the skinhead scene. Okay, so before we jump into kind of a synopsis / reaction to the major plot points, do you want to say anything about how you came to the film, or or what you brought with you? Sorry.
I didn't do any research. I didn't want to be influenced by anyone else's, commentary about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't do any research afterwards either. So I'm just going to be sharing my impressions and, some intertextual connections that I made.
Okay.
But it seems to me that the split, this kind of schism that occurred within the skinhead movement, is embodied by the Stephen Graham character, who's called Combo, I believe.
Combo.
Yeah. Of an amazing performance.
Yeah.
But horrifying character in many ways. Pathetic also, but very disturbing. But he kind of embodies that shift from, the, I guess, original multicultural kind of skinhead to this white nationalist skinhead. I mean, he calls himself an original skinhead. He mentions 69. I'm assuming that's when he was born, right? He was like born in 69 and grew up with like the West Indies music.
Because the film starts in the film starts in 1983, so he can't have been born in 1969, because then he would have been 14, and he's clearly much older than that. So I think he means he became a skinhead in 69.
So that's when would he have been born? How old do you think he would have been
in the film?
Yeah, you're right. He couldn't have, if it was 83, he couldn't have been born in 69, because he'd only be 14. So he's probably what? 24? 25?
Or a bit older. Maybe you're right. It's hard to say. Yeah, so born in the 50s. We can say that much. Right?
Yeah, let's say he became... Okay, so he's saying he became a skinhead in 69.
Yeah.
So maybe he was 18, 17, 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, early 50s he's born. Born in the 50s, as the Police song would have it. And
another little interesting aside
by music of that period too, now that I think about it.
No, it's also just interesting because I happened to attend a lecture here in St. Petersburg on dub, ska, reggae, and two-step. So it was kind of interesting to then go watch this film, which had these links, and yeah, clearly a Jamaican music form influenced by Britain because of immigration, and then ska being an offshoot of some of these original Jamaican forms that kind of took a more white face. But I know that, and I wish I had this fact at hand, but at one point there were black musicians playing for largely skinhead audiences, and even writing a song, I think, called like Skinhead in a very affectionate way. So it was, as you said, a multicultural movement um, that really embraced these new music forms as a way to party and kind of define themselves, right?
Couple
So
of things there. I'm
sure,
thinking again of the Police, who described their music as regatta de blanc, white reggae. You know,
right? Yeah, I always liked that influence on their music, actually.
yeah. But I'm also thinking of the changing definition of skinhead. I mean, you and I are both skinheads, aren't we?
Yep.
What does it mean for us? What did it mean for them? Like
Yeah,
there's like a skinhead uniform, you know, and there's even a scene where when they initiate the the young boy Sean into the gang, he's got to adopt the uniform, right?
right.
It's the crew cut. It's actually not uh you know,
It's not a skinhead.
right. It's really more of what we call a crew cut or a fade. Uh then there are the rolled up jeans, the Doc Martens, the suspenders, and a kind of flannel shirt.
A Ben Sherman shirt.
Okay, I don't know what that is. That's a
It's just a
brand.
brand, but yeah, I
Okay,
guess that's
but it's
part
a
of the
kind of like a lumberjack shirt, right? Or
right.
I don't know how you describe it. But that's the uniform. If you want to be part of that movement,
Right.
that's the look. And so, you know, how does this transformation occur? Like in the case of Combo, who, as we say, is the embodiment of this shift, uh, it seems like it was prison that changed him. And
Mm.
so this, you know, this made me think of an American movie, and I think you mentioned it in a text to me earlier today. Of course, I'm talking about American History X, where the you know uh, what's his name, Ed Norton Jr. character is, I mean, he's basically a member of a white supremacist group in prison, you know. So what is it about prison and incarceration that exacerbates these racial tensions?
Or ameliorates them to some extent. I mean, agreed that Ed Norton in prison is very much cognizant of how racially divided everything is. And I think I've heard that in different accounts of prison, that that's one of the kind of first things you have to kind of experience is you belong to your racial tribe. And regardless of whether you're actually racist or not, that's like that is a very crucial band of brothers that you have no choice but to join. Have you heard things like that about prison in the United States?
Yes,
Yeah. But I just wanted to say
but
interestingly,
I think they're regional differences. You know, sometimes that's more like pronounced in some places than others. Although I have no firsthand knowledge of that, and I hope I never do. But certainly, I've heard stories of people who were forced to join, you know,
right,
racially organized gangs
right,
in order to survive.
right. No, and the only thing I wanted to add is that American History X, which I feel like has a lot of parallels, as you've mentioned, um, it produced in 1999, by the way, so a 7-year difference.
Mm.
Ed Norton's character goes into prison, with the swastika on his chest and like espousing all those values, but comes out reformed, comes out, you know, ashamed of his previous views, and he sees his younger brother Danny.
Well, that's after he gets butt raped in the shower, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying the prison didn't radicalize him. That's my only point. Right?
Well, it radicalized him in a different way, you know, like he saw the insanity of that and
Yeah,
the I don't know, corruption.
yeah. And then I always think about Malcolm X too, and how prison affected him. But
Yeah. Well, and another uh, film that I was reminded of was Clockwork Orange.
okay,
Did you get that droogy vibe from the gang? I mean,
a little
even
bit, yeah.
yeah, even like the fat character. I can't remember
Right,
what that boy's name was.
Gadget.
Gadget. There you go. He reminds me of Dim, who was very dim in A
Right.
Clockwork Orange. Remember?
Yeah, I do remember.
And those guys became like radicalized in their own ways too. They became cops, right? At the end, they beat up the Malcolm McDowell character. They've become cops after being criminals.
Okay,
So there's
okay.
so there's like a I mean, of course, I was also reminded of the Umberto Eco essay on Urfascism, right? Uh, and the way that, but because the National Front organization is what he would call an Ur-fascist group. It's kind of a proto-fascism or fascism in the making, right? Of those 14 or however many characteristics that are mentioned in the essay, I think we could probably identify a good 7 or 8 in the characters in this film, don't you think?
Mm. Yeah.
And
The
it
other
and
movie I'll throw out is Train Spotting,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is
you mentioned that before, and I hadn't thought of that, but that's right. Yeah, there's
completely
just the
different. I mean, I don't know what parallels beyond the fact that it's a group of
well,
males, British culture, obviously Scottish this time.
not only
We're
males, right? They're female
no, that's true. That's true. But
members.
the main characters are men.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about that, I think we can consider this like a coming of age
Yeah.
story, almost
Right.
a cinematic Bildungsroman. It's like
Mm.
uh, it's about male initiation and the need
Hmm.
for some kind of group with with which one can have solidarity because of the lack of a father figure, right? Like
Exactly.
little
Exactly.
Sean has lost his dad, who fought in the Falklands War.
And in American History X, Danny and Derek's father was shot and killed by a black narcotics dealer.
Okay.
So yeah, I felt that parallel was really intense to the point where I was like a little bit concerned if they were straight up ripping plot elements from American History X. Like that kind of bothered me, to be honest, because there's the scene in American History X where they duel over the rights to the basketball court. I don't know if you remember that scene.
I
But
don't.
basically, yeah, they just play this like epic basketball game because the Ed Norton character is actually really good at basketball, and like so the skinheads play these black guys, and the skinheads
Mm-hmm.
win, and so then now there's like their court, and we briefly see a similar scene, right,
With
where
the soccer ball
exactly,
and the 3 Muslim boys.
yeah, exactly. Um, I guess the final movie I'll throw out as a reference. This is not how we intended to start the show, but is a great film. My favorite out of all the films. Actually, I love Train Spotting too, so I can't say it's better than Train Spotting. But a film called Four Lions, which is like a satirical portrayal of some radical Muslims in England, and it's like a dark comedy, but it's
Oh,
really
I
great.
don't know this. 4 lions.
Yeah, it's amazing. We should
Okay.
do an episode on that one day.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so can we kind of get into the film now a little bit and just see what we made of the different plot points?
One other thing I want us
Sure.
to think about as we, discuss the plot elements, I guess, chronologically, is the importance of, if we're talking about these initiation rituals, the importance of tattooing.
Okay. Yeah.
Why? I mean, why is this so significant? There's the scene where little Sean, who I, refer to idiosyncratically as Ginger McCartney. He's like a little Paul McCartney.
Interesting.
Just he's got those cute puppy dog eyes.
Yeah.
He's for some reason he reminded me of Paul.
Okay.
If Paul were a carrot top or blonde, and 10 years old. How old is this kid, Sean? Do you
He's
think?
12 in the film, and he's 13 as an actor.
Okay, but
Yeah.
these other kids are much older, apart from maybe Gadget, who says he's 1 year above Sean. But
Right. And the girlfriend
Woody
is
and the
turning
others.
17, right? Which we can talk about that later.
You mean
Smell.
Smell?
Yeah.
Sounds like Michelle.
Exactly. But let's save that.
Yeah,
Let's save
that that is a very
Let's
that's a
table that.
very
Let's table that.
interesting that's a very interesting aspect of this. But okay, so Sean, I guess more generally we can talk about the importance of symbols, and this is something that Echo has pointed out too, right? Like, not only do you have the cross tattoo, but remember how sentimental Combo gets about the white and red flag with the St. George's cross, the way he talks about it. I mean, it's comical, or it would be comical if it weren't so repugnant. Like what
Yeah, I mean, it makes
it
sense. I mean, if you're a nationalist, you're obviously going to gravitate towards the flag is
sure,
like
sure, but that particular flag with the St. George's cross, do you know the history of that? I don't. Like,
I just know
at,
it's the
at,
England flag.
well, but there's also the Union Jack.
Yeah, but that's Great Britain. I mean,
Oh, I
yeah,
see what you're saying. So Union Jack is UK. It's the
exactly.
Union. That makes sense given its name. And England is just
Yeah, maybe
the
I'm more
England
familiar with
part.
that just from watching like England play in football, and it's like that's the flag that always comes out and so on. So
Well, I'm also thinking of those proto punks, the mods, and their appropriation of the Union Jack, like the Who, for example. That was an important part of their iconography. I mean, is it ironic? Is it sincere? I think in the Who's case, it's maybe both. But it's interesting that the Union Jack of the mods is kind of replaced by the St. George, the flag with the St. George's cross, uh, among the white nationalist skinheads.
yeah, I mean, I guess the link to the cross is crucial for white culture stuff as well, right? Like Christianity is tends to be claimed by white culture. Uh, and again, in American History X, the white supremacist gang is called the Disciples of Christ. So maybe that's like a attractive aspect
Well,
for them.
did you notice the spray painted graffiti? Maggie is a twat.
Yeah,
Did you see where it
twat,
was?
twat,
I'm using
twat.
the
A Brit,
the
yeah,
American pronunciation. Did you see where it was spray painted?
yeah, on a church.
The Church of Christ. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Okay, speaking of Maggie,
Ma-
we can get
Maggie,
into the
Maggie,
film.
Maggie, of course, being
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher.
yeah.
Was moment of silence. No. Okay, so let's get into the film now because that's a great transition. The film starts with some stock footage, an impressive array of documentary shots of critical political events going on in the UK with an emphasis on working class struggles, I guess you could say. We see references to the Falklands War. We hear a reggae soundtrack. We hear talk of strikes. What else do you remember from that opening? Anything else stand out?
Well, I was going to mention the strikes. That was the key for me. Uh, I'm not sure if you lived through this yourself, but I remember the 80s quite well. You know, the flip side of Thatcherism in the UK is Reaganism in the US. It's
Mm,
the beginning of this uh, neoliberal nightmare. Not the beginning, but let's say a kind of acceleration of it.
right.
Um, so yeah, there was like a visceral reaction I had to some of this, and not in a positive way. You know, is like repugnant to me because it also reminded me of like some of the unpleasant experiences of my adolescence. You know, with bullying and hazing, um, and
But are you jumping
you
into
know
the film's opening
the
scene already, or are we
awkwardness.
still on the stock footage?
Well, the stock footage reminds me of that because it takes me back to that period
Okay.
in the early to mid 80s, you know.
Yeah, well, the opening scene of the film, once we're done with that sequence that I described, the film tells us that it's July 1983 and it's the last day of term. And because it's the last day of term, it's like a free uniform day. So our protagonist, um, Sean, he is wearing
Ginger McCartney.
flares. Yeah, Ginger McCartney is wearing flares, which do look pretty ridiculous. And we see him arrive at school. I think even before he gets to school, he's getting bullied about these trousers, and it erupts when one guy who's giving him shit then makes a pretty crude joke about his dad who recently died in the Falklands War, and that sets Sean off. Sean attacks this guy whose name is Harvey,
And
and
who's like twice his size.
yeah,
I mean, you got to give Sean credit. He's pretty scrappy.
yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't so bold, you know.
No, me either.
I was the kind of punk ass bitch that would just like ignore, or well, it depends on the situation. But when I was his age, I was much more timid, much more of a good boy, mama's boy, trying not to get in trouble, trying to avoid
Yeah,
trouble.
I would say it's not necessarily to his credit, though. I mean, to some extent, but it endangers him more, and it's kind of more a symbol of his more desperate state, probably, than you and I were in. I mean, he lost his father. He's super working class, so it's just a rougher existence, I would say. I mean, I don't know about your exact class upbringing, but me and my friends, we were not looking to get bruised, you know. So, yeah. Um, Interesting about that scene is just after Harvey and Sean are seized by the principal or a teacher, we hear all these like screams, right? And I guess it's Harvey that's being beaten. Is that
Uh,
right?
yeah, but then Sean had his turn, and this also reminded me. I mean, once I was a bit older, maybe I would have been his age if he's 12, actually. You know, I started becoming more rebellious, and I stopped trying to be the good little boy, and so I got in trouble at school. And you know, in those days, uh, they still had corporal punishment. You know,
Really
so
in Texas?
absolutely, absolutely.
Because this was
And
shocking to me. I thought
no, no, man. The
1983.
principal, oh no, the principal at my school, in fact, was a friend of my parents and the father of a friend of mine. And he, you know, busted boys' asses every day. And several
With
times
what?
with a wooden paddle, like a long wooden paddle. It had
Like a
a
Dazed and Confused thing. like that.
Mm, I don't
Do you
remember
remember?
what was his. I've seen that
They do
film,
like
but I
the
don't remember.
hazing. They do like these constant. They're like hazing. The seniors are hazing the incoming freshmen with these kind of like cricket bats.
Kind of like that. But this is, an adult busting the ass of a child, basically. And I remember we would go into the office. The principal, he was the assistant principal or vice principal. He had a picture of a lion growling, and he would make you stand in front.
Wait, so
Well,
you
you
had
had
this
to,
experience?
yeah, several times. Uh,
Crazy.
so yeah, it is. When you think about it now, it's fucking
Yeah, like I'm
insane.
shocked. I thought this went out of. I thought this finished in like the 50s.
Absolutely not. So he would say, "Look at the lion." So you're staring at this poster of a lion growling, "Wah!" and you put your hands on the desk and you bend over, and we used to say, "Get that lick." You would get a certain number of licks depending on uh, you know the severity of your infraction, whatever it was. And
Right.
I remember it was like a a badge of honor to not cry. Did you
Yeah.
cry? Did you cry? You got to like keep it in. And I mean,
Right.
it's not pleasant, but uh I there were times when I was able to. I mean, I didn't like cry my eyes out. Maybe I would tear up a little bit, but I took it pretty well. I took it
If you
on
might
the
say so
ass.
yourself.
I took it on the ass pretty well. But
Good.
but yeah, when you think about it now, it's insane. But the same thing was happening in the States at that time. Corporal
Wow.
punishment. Absolutely. And this was not like it's not like parents didn't know about it. They supported it. They're like, yeah, how else are they going to learn? Spare the rod, spoil the child. That
Yeah.
was the attitude of those sadistic motherfuckers that raised us.
So, by the way, I wish I had a better knowledge of the Falklands War, but as I mentioned, Sean's father, who he has a picture of next to his bed, um, died recently in the Falklands conflict. Can you provide some historical context?
It was a dispute with Argentina, and
Right.
it was presented as some kind of heroic struggle for the sovereignty of England, but it's just a territorial dispute. And Ricky Gervais has a joke about it. It's like, he said Britain was just kicking a midget in the balls or something like that. It was a turkey shoot, as they said about the first Iraq War. It's just the American equivalent would be the Iraq War, as I mentioned, which was meant to overcome the Vietnam syndrome, right? Like, oh, people were demoralized by the defeat in Vietnam, so we needed an easy victory to bring people back into the fold, so they'd start waving the fucking flag again. And I think it was something similar with the Falkland Islands. Thatcher just wanted to prove that she was tough and, you know,
And how did
bring
it
the
end? Do you know?
bring the well, Britain won.
Okay.
I think they reclaimed uh whatever, you know, islands they were fighting over.
I mean, I could quickly
But
Google it just to see
but
like how many people died. I'm curious,
but
you know.
well, this is the interesting thing. As repugnant as the combo character is, I actually agree with his take on that misadventure. What he says before Sean gets triggered and starts lashing out at him.
Sure. And I want to talk about that as like an issue as well, but the grievances that working class Britain had, and which are valid and maybe which are misdirected. Uh, just a very quick reference to the Falklands War, which I looked up. But yeah, it was a 10-week undeclared war between Argentina and the UK. The conflict lasted 74 days and ended with an Argentine surrender on 14th of June, returning the islands to British control. In total, 649 Argentine military personnel, 255 British military personnel, and 3 Falkland Islanders were killed. So, I mean, it's interesting. If his father died, that means he was one of 255, which is not many, without sounding callous. But yeah, I mean, not compared to the kind of casualties we're seeing right now in a unnamed conflict.
Yeah.
So, shortly after this, Sean is walking home. He's had another tough day of being bullied, and he comes across the group of skinheads that we've mentioned hanging out under a bridge, and they include Gadget, who you mentioned before, Woody, who is their presumed leader, Milky, who is the only ethnically diverse member of their group. When I say ethnically diverse, I mean non-white, Pukey, and Kez. So,
and at first,
do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah.
scene?
I mean, at first I thought, oh, Sean's going to get his ass kicked again. But actually, they're very welcoming, especially Woody, who is a delightful character. I mean, he really takes Sean under his wing and becomes like a mentor and a elder brother figure. He really cares about him,
Was that believable to you?
Yes,
because
it was surprising.
That level of like kindness.
It was
from
surprising,
in his situation.
but it was. Yes, it was believable. I mean, they genuinely had this solidarity, and it's kind of like maybe that's what the original skinhead culture was like, with the ethnic diversity, the multiculturalism, the embrace of different forms of music, and
and if they were boys that were bullied themselves, which they may have been, right, then it's like, oh, if you find somebody else who fits that mold, you make sure to protect them.
Yeah, well, there's a whole backstory that we don't really get the details about. I mean, Woody directly says that Combo went to jail so he wouldn't have to. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What happened?
Right.
We don't know. I mean, unless you did some research that I didn't do, but
no.
What was it? Vandalism, theft? I mean, I have the impression that Woody was, maybe a bit of a hellion,
wild child,
and then he was scared straight after, almost going to prison, and so this is why he's conflicted when Combo comes back, because he feels he owes him some kind of debt, right? But he's also repulsed by what has become of him.
Right. Next, we have a scene which kind of shows the camaraderie between the boys, and maybe the kind of stuff that gives them kicks. And it's this destruction scene of this abandoned house, and then they end up in like an abandoned movie theater, right? Do you want to comment on that, or should we just?
Well, where do you think this was? What part of England?
Apparently, it's a place called Grimsby, sorry.
And where is that?
Grimsby is a port town in northeast of
Okay,
England.
so near
Yeah.
Manchester, maybe.
Well, it's definitely got the northern accent. You'll hear the people saying love a lot.
Mm.
Um, and people in the north tend to be quite sweet. I don't know if you caught the interview with my friend Tom on our episode about the CUNT word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like how when he went up to the north, they were more offended by his use of that word.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a tougher area, right? Tougher economically.
Well, this
So
is,
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
just
yeah, and so I've never been to Manchester, but my impression of it from, I don't know, reading about it and watching documentaries about Joy Division and the Smiths and so on, and Black Sabbath too. Actually, they're from Manchester. Um, yeah, it's rough and it's desolate. Like there are all kinds of these rundown neighborhoods, abandoned houses. For some reason, I'm thinking of the term council flats. I don't even know what
yep,
those
that's a good
are.
one.
But
Council Flats is like the projects.
okay, yeah. So that's what I'm thinking we're looking at. And so, you know, in London during the punk era, I know that these abandoned places were uh taken over by squatters. Like
Hmm.
if a place is not occupied, you can just squat there. You move in, and uh if you can uh take care of the place and maintain it, then you can stay there.
It's hard
But
to believe that that would happen now, but I guess it could have happened. Yeah.
yeah, well, that
I
was
mean, London now is like 1 inch of real estate is worth £1 million.
yeah, that was back in the 70s and 80s, I think, maybe going back to the 60s. But in the north, maybe no effort was made to like renovate those places. They just destroyed them, for amusement.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly very economically depressed. Just a quick reference. So it's relatively close to Hull. I know that Hull is one of the poorest major cities in England, and it's also kind of close to Sheffield and Leeds, and then also Manchester.
Okay.
So
Well,
just to
Hull, that's interesting. I think that's where Bowie's guitarist Mick Ronson was from. And supposedly his accent was so pronounced, the Hull dialect,
mm,
when he produced Lou Reed's Transformer album. I mean, Bowie's listed as the producer, but Mick Ronson basically did everything. Uh, Lou Reed couldn't understand him. It's like they had trouble communicating because the whole accent was just not comprehensible at times to the American ear. And so I had to like replay some of these scenes because I was like, what did he say? Did you have
yeah,
that
I watched with
experience?
subtitles. I watched with subtitles because I was watching with Liliana too, so it's always helpful for her.
Oh, the version that you sent me, I didn't know it had subtitles.
It didn't. I download them separately and then
I
throw them
see, I
on.
see.
Can
uh
we pause? Sorry, buddy. I need to pee. So, do we have a pause function? Or are we gonna have
uh
to just do a whole new recording?
let's just stop it here and we'll see.
All right, I'll be back in a sec.